Hello, everyone. Welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Amar Shirsat, who is the co-founder and CTO of GrowthPal, which is a AI-powered platform for merger and acquisitions. Hi, Amar. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Amar, I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about your background and what all did you do before starting this venture.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Amar. I'm in this industry for close to 30 years now. Primarily worked with multiple startups, uh, which became part of large multinationals like Symantec, Tenable through acquisition. I have founded a couple of companies of my own. I joined a couple of founders early on in their journey. And yeah, so right now I'm building the data platform for GrowthPal. I'm responsible for the product and technology side of the house at GrowthPal.
Got it. Can you explain to us what kind of a product GrowthPal is? And who is the user? What
Sure.
problem is it solving, and how it is solving?
Okay. So GrowthPal, see, we operate in a M&A space, right? Mergers and acquisition space.
Mhm.
So you can, it's a data platform for which is used for deal sourcing using large volume of data, patterns, insights, but primarily for deal sourcing, right? So put it in simple terms, it's like matchmaking for companies,
Okay.
where a buyer is looking for a seller, um, and GrowthPal helps them identify the right buyer, right seller through various techniques, technologies, data, etc.
Okay. Okay.
So in terms of the product that we are building, I mean, you asked about the product, right? So
Mm.
the product, see, so far we were having mostly a high touch model where the buyers will come, they'll give us their requirements in terms of what is it that they're looking for in terms of the company size, the technology they want to pursue,
Mhm.
and the high level expectations in terms of revenue, profit margin, etc. And then we have this platform where data analysts would run those queries and then accumulate a lot of information. Then they'll reach out and then they'll recommend some companies. Now, what we have started building now is a complete uh, SaaS offering where without any human touch, the buyer should be able to identify the right companies
Okay.
through AI and a lot of data processing.
Got it. So would it be wrong to say that your primary target personas are the companies who are looking for buying the other companies? So they're on a lookout. They have a surplus of fund, and they're on a lookout for buying companies which would integrate with their current offerings and make it a bigger entity.
That is right. That is right. So that's the persona that we are targeting today. Although we are building GrowthPal as a platform for both, right? So for buyers as well as for sellers. And there is going to be value proposition for both. But you are right. Today we are serving the buyers side of the house.
Okay.
And even within buyers, the typical user personas are the strategy department or the corporate development department who are responsible for identifying companies to acquire, right? Given a uh, inorganic growth objective.
So, in combination with the SaaS offering, you're also building a marketplace sort of model where also the buyers, also the sellers have, shown their interest to, getting acquired by another company, and buyers are also there.
Yeah. So it's good that you asked that question because typically it is confused with marketplaces. Although the use case is similar, where there is demand side players and there is supply side players, right? And you are bringing both of them together. Uh, the significant difference here in terms of M&A is it's a very sensitive operation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things that happen are extremely confidential.
Right.
Uh, and those are not published. So a seller doesn't want to tell that his or her company is for sale.
Mm.
Similarly, a buyer doesn't want to show the intent that, okay, I'm pursuing this company or I'm looking for this company, right?
Mm.
And only until it reaches a certain stage, they are kind of announcing it or making it public. Uh, so to differentiate from a typical marketplace model where it is publicly available on both sides, uh, this is a very confidential kind of a platform. But yes, both parties come on the platform. They get to see certain things based on the preferences they have set, and they see the recommendations from the other side.
Got it. Can you explain to us the logistic of the entire process? Like, how does a buyer gets onboarded to the platform, and how does he or she shows interest, and vice versa? How does a seller do it? Plus, how does the thing work in a long term? Because merger and acquisition is usually one-time process. So, let's say some company is trying to acquire, it will acquire one company or probably two companies, and then they have no value for your platform. And similarly for the seller, probably once only they'll use your platform. So
Okay.
how does it work in a SaaS model?
Correct, correct. Yeah, that's a great question. So, see, when I say we deal with deal sourcing or the discovery of companies, right? Typically, it's a continuous process for most of the mature organizations. So, first of all, let me walk through the entire process of M&A, right? So, typically,
Yeah.
what happens is, uh, see, every company wants to grow, right? So, there are growth objectives set for every company. Now, uh, the growth is typically planned in an organic manner and inorganic manner, right? So when a company reaches a certain size, then the organic growth is always, it tapers down, right? So you can't grow, let's say, beyond 15%, 20% once you reach a certain size, because that itself is huge challenge. So whatever additional 5%, 10% that you want to achieve, you would always look for inorganic growth, right? So companies which are ambitious, which are ahead in their game, uh, they are always on the lookout of inorganic growth, which means they are always looking for strategies where they can identify opportunities for inorganic growth, right? So that's one. Second, for that inorganic growth, then they have to identify their objective. The objective could be, okay, I want to grow in a particular geography. That's my objective, right? I want to add a certain kind of capability. That can be my objective. Or I want to acquire certain kind of companies, Fortune 500 companies, or I want to grow in, let's say, European market for healthcare. Let's say I'm a big IT services company, but I don't have a very strong portfolio of European Fortune 500 companies in healthcare domain, right? So I may want to acquire that. So companies have different objectives, right? So the way this platform works is we prepare data of all sales side companies, right? And that data, so today we have close to 3.5 million companies across the world,
Mhm.
uh, which is collected through various data sources. We have our data collection engines, which constantly keep running and keep collecting more and more data about the sales side companies. Uh, and the data is in multiple forms, right? So data is in the form of the standard attributes of a company, which are typically seen by the buyer. Also indirect signals, right? So whether the company is in the news, whether the company is growing, whether the company has, let's say, hired a new executive or acquired a new client, right? Or done a new partnership, gone for some sort of certification, all of that, right? So these are all different signals which could be interesting to the buyers.
Mm.
So our uh, data collection agents, which constantly keep monitoring the entire internet for this kind of information, and they keep tagging these companies. And that's the enriched data, which is now prepared and enriched uh, based on the context of the buyer. Uh, So the process, the way it works is buyer puts in the requirement, which is in M&A taxonomy is called a mandate, a business mandate, right? So their mandate would say that, okay, I want to have this growth objective for European geography, for this sector, this size, and this is the kind of company. So GrowthPal engine automatically will rank the sales side companies based on this objective, right? And it will keep on monitoring for any further changes. And those are the recommendations that keep getting available to the buyer.
Understood. Uh, One challenge I foresee is the data that is collected from internet. They are in different formats. It's very hard to standardize, and the relevance of each data is also different. Like for example, you get a data on some companies firing people, so that can be a signal, or some companies launching a new product or discontinuing a new product, that can be signal. So how do you compare these very different data points, and how do you make sure that the combine, so you must be scoring each of the signals, and then creating a score, overall score, on the relevance. So how do you go about it? Can you explain in detail?
Sure, sure. So we build a lot of algorithms for data enrichment, right? So depending on the kind of data that is being collected, there are data enrichment algorithms which process that data, and it classifies companies, their strengths, weaknesses into multiple fields, right? Uh, so, for example, capabilities. So whatever the company claims as a capability that they have, let's say it's an IT services company, and there are certain skills that are required to deliver that capability. Now, if the employees don't have that skills, then that
Mm.
capability may not be their strength, right? Their strength could be somewhere else. Let's say they want to offer Salesforce uh, integration as the capability versus AWS cloud integration as a capability, right? So the GrowthPal engine, the AI engine, it constantly monitors and it builds classification models based on this. Uh, and these are put in various buckets. And then we have our AI models, which are constantly trained on this kind of data, right? So based on the query that is performed, uh, because the requirements evolve over a period of time, the requirements are never fixed. Even the buyer at times, they don't know what is it that they're exactly looking for. So once they start seeing some results, right? So they may fine tune the results, just like how we typically perform a Google search. Uh, you will see some results on your first page. You will not be happy with that. And you will fine tune your query, right? And you will run another search. So yeah, so that's how the system works.
Got it. Apart from the signals that you generate from internet, I think there is some additional set of data which are not readily available on internet, but that should be also part of your suggestion engine. For example, whether a company is doing due diligence, are the accounting in adherence with the accounting standards, or are there any malpractices happening in the company? How do you get those signals, or understand those things?
Yeah. Yeah. So some of this is primary data, and part of it is typically done as part of due diligence process.
Mm.
When somebody has identified a potential target, and now they want to go ahead with the next level of engagement, right? So some of those details come out at the due diligence phase, and those are currently not handled by the platform, right? Because those are very much um, personal or inherent to the company. And unless you talk to the company, those will not be available. So what we look for is what is the best fit in terms of the synergy that is expected between buyer and seller,
Mm.
uh, right? And that's where we train our AI, and the recommendation engine is built on that.
Got it. I read it somewhere that your platform kind of focuses on deal sizes worth 1 million to 50 million. Can you tell us why that is considered as a sweet spot of
Yeah.
investment, and how do you How does this niche shape the features and capabilities of your platform?
Right. Yeah. So see, if you look at the entire M&A market, right? So most of the large deals are handled by investment bankers. And the way the process works is buyers would typically know that okay, if they want to acquire a 250 million or $300 million company, uh, then there are already known names in the market, right? There is no discovery challenge as such.
Mhm.
The process begins through an investment banker with whom maybe that seller has an account, and they would have more data about that company, right? Because they are dealing with that business on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes even the recommendations from investment bankers come based on the seller's request. So sellers want to sell a company, and investment banker has that relationship, and they will go scout for buyers. Uh, and this typically happens for deal sizes which are more than $100 million, right?
Okay.
So, and that's the business model of investment bankers, because they will have their 3 to 5% or 7%, whatever fees they charge based on the deal size. Uh, Anything which is less than $100 million, first of all, the volume is extremely large, right? Second, it doesn't fit in the business model of investment bankers
Right.
because of the deal size, it's not really worth their effort. Plus, it is a problem which has to be solved through technology. It cannot be solved through relationships, right? Typically, investment banker deals are through relationships.
Mm.
So this is where, and that's where the number, I mean, we are currently dealing with 3.5 million companies across the world, and identifying the strengths, identifying weaknesses, identifying how they're changing over time, and how does that relate to the buyer vis-a-vis the synergy with the buyer's offering is the problem that we are solving here, right?
Interesting point. You mentioned that the investment bankers charge some percentage of the deal value, so as a charge for their services. So I'm curious to know, how do you price your platform? So is it based on the percentage of the deal size, or on a user basis, per user, or per data tokens or API tokens, or how do you charge?
Yeah. Yeah. So today we charge, it's a combination. We charge a subscription fee, which is typically anywhere from $24,000 to $36,000 uh, per user, right?
Okay.
Uh, and then we charge a small finder's fee. We call it a finder's fee, which is in proportion to the deal size, which again, depending on the deal size, it can be anywhere in the range of 1%, not as high as investment banker would charge. And of course, investment banker follows through the entire deal, and they do a lot more than what we would typically do, because we stop at that point where a buyer is connected with a seller, and they have agreed to sign an LOI. Our job is over, right? Um, what we also do, and this is where our next flagship product release is going to happen early next year, is we have an AI agent which constantly monitors. Let's say you are the buyer, right, and you have 20 competitors, and you have 10 potential targets that you want to monitor. So this AI agent will constantly keep monitoring for any changes, any strategies, any acquisitions that the competitions have done, right?
Mhm.
And then it comes up with recommendation instantaneously for you as a company based on your white spaces, your gaps, your strengths, your offerings, right? And what is available on the market. If you were to counter, let's say, that particular acquisition done by your competitor. Uh, so that's a continuous process, right? And this is typically what is currently lacking for the strategy heads or the CEOs of these mid-sized companies. And this is where they have to spend a lot of time to constantly monitor and decide what should be their inorganic growth strategy.
Understood. And speaking of AI agents, I think the AI agentic framework is a buzzword now after NVIDIA launched the agentic framework. and every company is sort of working on some building some sort of agents to do some level of automated tasks. So uh, apart from monitoring competitors, what else are you planning to do through the AI agents? For example, the things that I can foresee is some of the due diligence, or maybe automating the initial few round of communication and so on can also be done through the
Correct.
AI. So what all things are you planning to do?
Yeah. So good point, very good point. So see, there are possibilities are enormous here, right? Because M&A as a workflow, if you consider, there are multiple complex, uh, multiple workflows involved in each step, right? It's not just a single workflow. Uh, there are potential opportunities everywhere. There are multiple players in the fag end of the process, and they're already there, and they have already started building some of those automation workflows. Where we come in picture is we come in uh, towards the early stage of the process, right? Which is where you are discovering your strategy, right? So you have a goal of growing at, let's say, 20%, and maybe 5% of that will come inorganically.
Right.
Now, what should be your strategy in terms of, okay, whether I should be going for capability expansion or a geography expansion, or would it help for me to acquire a new Fortune 500 company, right? What are those scenarios? And can I play those scenarios, uh, predict the outcome, and based on that, make a decision, and then start my discovery process for identifying the deals, is where we come in picture. And those are the workflows that we are building. We are also building the workflows for reaching out to the potential sellers, right? So the automation of the entire communication, and then there is a consent layer that is built in because again, these are all discrete operations, like I said before. So a seller has to provide consent to be able to present certain kind of information to the buyer,
Right.
and all of this is getting automated. So those are the kind of agentic workflows that we are building.
Got it. And at the beginning of the discussion, you said confidentiality is something that's a part of the platform. You don't reveal who is the buyer, who is the seller before a certain level of communication and signing the NDAs has happened.
Mhm.
So curious to understand, how do you maintain that confidentially? Because uh, the way I see it, let's say I see a player listed for selling and I
Mhm.
see some of the description written, I can easily find out who is that particular player based on the employee count, based on the industry, based on whatever description is there. So how
Correct.
do you maintain that?
Correct. So there are two parts to it, right? One is public information, and second is private information. Uh, so public information, I mean, if you are the buyer, if you are looking for certain companies, you can always do a Google search and you can see what are the potential companies which are operating in that space. Go check out their LinkedIn profile, go on their website, right? And get those details. So that's the public information. You can get the same public information through GrowthPal platform, right? There is no hiding of that, right? Uh, what is what requires consent is whether this company has an intent to sell or whether this company has an intent to buy, right? So those intent specific details and then rest of the other details which will come along with it is something that is hidden, right? Now, once we reach out to a seller and let's say uh, introduce ourselves, of course, through automation, and when the seller comes on board and they would like to know who the buyer is, right? So that's where a blind profile is shared. Now, the blind profile will have certain details, not all the details. So those certain details, again, you may find five different companies with those details, right? But not the exact company. Similarly, for the seller, again, similar certain details. Once they both agree to reveal their names, then only they can talk to each other.
Okay, got it. Um, Another thing I wanted to ask was the integration stack. So every SaaS platform these days integrates to many other systems to either gather data or maybe communicate with other platforms to make things more smooth. So can you say what all systems that you have integrated with, and how do you make it easy for the stakeholders to uh, flow the data from one system to another, and so on?
Yeah. So currently we integrate the standard communication mechanisms that you look for, right? Uh, for instance, you don't have to go get the details from LinkedIn, or you don't have to go get details from the company website, right? So those details are already available. Or you don't have to manually send an email. It can go through the platform. Um, but in future, there are going to be multiple other integrations which are involved with the rest of the M&A steps.
Got it. And since you are using integrations, and I'm sure you are using some sort of third-party AI engines to build your solutions on top of that. So what happens is sometimes data security and privacy becomes a concern because data flows outside of your platform to another platform for processing and everything. So how do you make sure that data security um, is intact with the sensitive information of your clients that you have stored in your system?
Yeah, it's a good question. So uh, sensitive data given by the client is not revealed to any of these platforms, right? See, these platforms are used for general analysis. Now that analysis is in the form of generic terms. For example, if I have to identify synergy and if I'm going to deploy an AI engine to evaluate synergy based on, let's say, 30 parameters coming from this company, 50 parameters coming from the other company, right? And I'm identifying the synergy. Uh, so those are generic details. Those are not company specific details, right? Uh, Nowhere the company name is passed on to these platforms. So you perform analysis purely based on certain parameters, and then you bring it back and you determine recommendation based on it. So part of the system stays within the organization. Part of the information goes to the LLMs where it gets processed. Where it is extremely confidential, we have our own models. So we build our own models, not necessarily for confidentiality, but where we see some of these LLMs lack uh, the accuracy that is required, with a lot of hallucination that you are already aware of.
Yeah,
So we have built our own model.
got it. And since you also operate globally, and a lot of cross-border things happen, one company in India wants to acquire another company in Europe. So with that comes a lot of complexities like cultural differences, regulatory differences, and market difference. So how do you navigate through these sort of complexities?
Yeah. So yeah, most of those challenges about compliance, when it comes to the rest of the discussions, right? They come later in the game as far as M&A process is concerned. For example, uh, if you have to manage a data room for your due diligence process, right? And if you were to share some, exchange some documents, those documents have to be securely stored. They should not cross, for example, if it's Europe, it should not cross the Europe boundary physically. Uh, so GDPR comes in picture, right? So those kind of considerations are for those products. For our use cases, fortunately, we don't have to deal with that. Uh, and wherever we have information that is processed, it is locally processed.
Got it. And before we end, my final question is around hiring. So uh, hiring tech talent has become very expensive these days, and to build a system with multiple different type of technologies in place, you need resources in AI, resources in data science, and so on. How do you make sure that you hire the right talent? How do you retain them? And how do you make sure that you are hiring it at a reasonable cost?
Yeah, yeah. So those are the challenges. I wouldn't say that we have solved all those problems, but based on what I have seen so far, by being in this field for 30 years and working with multiple startups, uh, you will always find passionate people who are entrepreneurial themselves, right? So an entrepreneur doesn't have to be somebody who starts a company. An entrepreneur, in my mind, is somebody who is working with the other entrepreneur by taking a high risk, right? And I have uh, experienced, and I still get them, many people who are motivated by a cause or a challenge, and then they are ready to give up on maybe their initial salary, with, of course, the expectation and hope that something big is going to happen over a period of time, right? But they're willing to take that risk. So such passionate individuals are there. You just have to find them. And as long as you are true to your problem statement and you're solving a big enough problem, right? They will stay with you.
So, well, on this point, we have come to the closure of the session. Thanks for joining us, Amar. It was a pleasure to have you on our platform. And thanks for taking us through the nuances of merger and acquisition and how technology is helping in the whole process.
Thank you so much, Priyanjan. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Amar.